Halloween is spooky, Halloween is fun, let's all talk about wrestling and have some wrestling fun. My name is Jack the Jobber and welcome back to Very Weird Wrestling, everybody. This is episode 6, WCW Halloween Havoc 98. Ooh, scary. So thank you to the people on my Patreon for voting for another great wrestling show for me to watch. Nice one, guys. There they are on screen. Thank you now. Okay. So, if you know anything about wrestling history, especially in the late 90s, you'll know we've been dropped into a very intriguing time here. And again, as many of you will know, WCW, World Championship Wrestling, were red hot in 96 and 97, with Hulk Hogan's groundbreaking, game-changing heel turn, the formation of the NWO, and their battle against the WCW loyalists had pretty much flipped the North American wrestling landscape on its head. This all boosted WCW's flagship show Nitro to a commanding lead over Monday Night Raw in the ratings, a lead which looked only like it was about to increase after the jump of Bret Hart from WWF over to WCW, now very vengeful, of course, against his former employees after the Montreal Screwjob. But then something quite unexpected happened. The Fed began to stage a remarkable comeback, thanks in part to the controversy of the Montreal Screwjob, which turned its owner, Vince McMahon of course, into the top on-screen villain as well. This coincided with the explosive rise of former WCW star Stone Cold Steve Austin, and suddenly it's the peak of the Attitude Era, the WWF are firing on all cylinders again, and now they're winning the ratings war again as we enter the summer of 98. And by the summer of 98, the New World Order's honeymoon period had well and truly worn off. Rather than decisively put over WCW's babyfaces to kind of end that storyline and move on to the next big arc in WCW's history, the group stuck around instead and became increasingly bloated. And this was, in the opinions of many, also in part due to the rampant backstage politicking of various figures within the stable, people like Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash. In 98, the storyline, it did change a bit. It went from the NWO versus WCW to the NWO versus the NWO. This led to the ultimate split in mid-98, with the group forming two rival factions, the babyface NWO Wolfpack, led by Kevin Nash, and the heel NWO Hollywood, led by Hollywood Hulk Hogan. And this all got quite convoluted. Members of the two groups joined and left and defected and double-crossed all over the place. And meanwhile, remember, WCW had a collection of secretly, ludicrously talented wrestlers on their undercard who were just kind of lost in the shuffle. I'm talking about people who would go on to be massive names in the industry, people like Chris Jericho, Booker T, Rey Mysterio, and Eddie Guerrero. So then we enter July 98. The WWF is still winning the ratings war, but WCW counter by putting their belt on their version of Steve Austin, a man named Goldberg. He is this uncomplicated, undefeated, ass-kicking badass, the perfect antidote to audiences maybe suffering from NWO fatigue, and the perfect remedy to all this kind of scheming and swerving and strange booking decisions. You got this big, scary guy, make him your champion, he beats people and does so with relative quickness and ease. It was refreshing at the time. But after a little while back on top of the ratings, in the build-up to this pay-per-view, Halloween Havoc, WCW have started to slip behind once again, thanks in part to the popularity of a man you may have heard of, The Rock. It's Dwayne The Rock Johnson. And the reason I give all that background information isn't just to contextualize the show, but to emphasize the importance of this pay-per-view. WCW really need this pay-per-view to be a good one because they need to rebound and land another counter blow in the ratings war. They don't want to slip further behind WWF heading into 1999. And if you know your wrestling history, well, I'll just leave it there for now. This is Very Weird Wrestling, and this is Halloween Havoc. Baby! Three big matches to get hyped about straight off the bat. We have the WCW title on the line with champion Goldberg defending against fellow babyface Diamond Dallas Page, a match which sounds relatively free of all the swervy NWO nonsense, and it's the main event as well, so that's pretty good going straight off the bat. I've said straight off the bat twice, I believe, in quick succession. Professional YouTuber. We also have a rematch of the legendary WrestleMania 6 main event between Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. But now, of course, whereas back in the day that was face versus face, now, some 8 years later, Hogan's a heel, guys. And the Ultimate Warrior is just known as the Warrior as well. The third big match is Bret Hart versus Sting. Now that's a huge matchup. But not just any version of Bret Hart, by the way. Heel Bret Hart, more on my thoughts on that later on. He's not a member of NWO Hollywood, but he is affiliated with the group. Yeah, we'll talk about it more. It's a weird one. Sting is, of course, as ever, one of the biggest babyfaces in WCW, but now he's representing the NWO Wolfpack, and he wears red sometimes. It's a pretty stacked card, let's be honest. They've got a special Halloween-themed set, they're in Las Vegas, everybody's very excited, and I think heading in, it seems to bode quite well. Vague spoilers here, so don't worry, but this show contains a match commonly considered to be one particular wrestler's greatest match of his entire career. It also contains a match commonly considered to be one of the single worst wrestling matches of all time. I won't mention which of the matches are those things until we've covered them. So that'll be a fun little game, won't it? A fun little Halloween game, because Halloween's spooky, Halloween's fun. The poem I did at the start was stupid. We start off with a look at the spooky set for the show. Big pumpkin, very nice. We also take a look at the announce team, Tony Schiavone, Mike Tenay, and the legendary Bobby the Brain Heenan. Very nice also. Heenan puts on a special Halloween mask and Schiavone pulls it back and snaps it into his face. They're just having fun. It's genuinely quite charming, and then we get a welcoming dance from the Nitro Girls, and I'm like, no! I don't want to see girls dancing in the ring. I want to see big, sweaty men wrestle each other. So take your dance and get out of there, please. Sweaty big men. The Nitro Girls dance a lot on this show, just in between matches, and there's no angle during the dance or anything. It's just dancing. So I'm just not going to mention it now from now on whenever it happens. But less dancing, more sweat. That's the rule. That's the number one rule of the business. Finally, it's time for our first match of the night. Oh no, it's not. It's an interview segment to hype a match later on. I want the sweaty men! Mean Gene Okerlund interviews Rick Steiner. He's the dad of Bron Breakker, didn't you know? And he's set to wrestle his heelish brother, Scott Steiner, on tonight's event show card. I'll talk about the build to this match a little bit more when we approach it later on the card. It's a few matches in. But the main thing to know is that Rick Steiner isn't certain whether he can trust former NWO member Buff Bagwell. But the man himself, Buff Bagwell, interrupts to say, hang on there, Rick, I am actually a trustworthy boy, and if you haven't seen what Buff Bagwell looked like around this time, look at Buff Bagwell. Isn't that the most natural baby face you've ever seen? To make things even less trustworthy, Buff only very recently was actually a heel. But then Buff turned face and saved Rick from a Scott Steiner beatdown the previous week. He's been face for a week, and now he's like, you can trust me, brother. Not only that, but he also wants to be in Rick's corner for the match tonight. Rick's gotta say no, right? Rick, you're not an idiot, are you, Rick? Rick? The crowd obviously boo Buff Bagwell's very transparent attempt to fool Rick Steiner, and rightly so. Rick gets on the mic and says, Raphael's as shocked as I am. Rick gets on the mic and says, you're alright, Bagwell, or words to that effect. They both bark at each other, woof woof. Buff barks back at Rick, barking's Rick's thing. By barking himself, Buff has proven that Rick can trust him apparently, and that's all it takes. They high five and off they go, and Rick Steiner is screwed. He can't actually be that stupid, can he? Well, we'll find out. Okay, finally, our first actual match segment of the night. It's Chris Jericho defending the TV title against Raven. Good. Raven's actually very sad around this time, though. Oh, that's because he lost his US title to Goldberg. Nobody can beat Goldberg. And he blamed his stable, the Flock. So the Flock left Raven, and now he's all alone. Jericho, meanwhile, in 1998, is the exact example of what I mentioned earlier. These amazingly talented wrestlers stuck on the undercard beneath all the NWO shenanigans. As a bonus as well, he just happens to be one of the most charismatic guys in the entire company, probably. Jericho, by the way, was calling out Goldberg around this time in very humorous, heelish fashion to try and basically get a pay-per-view match between the two, I believe. Jericho has since admitted this in real life. A pay-per-view match that never ended up happening. Apparently, despite Jericho only really requesting like just a quick squash loss for himself, he didn't want to beat Goldberg or anything. Apparently WCW management and Goldberg himself weren't keen on the idea, and Jericho then has later said that it was a big reason this match never happening for him wanting to leave WCW and jump ship. This non-feud basically at least gave us a handful of great moments, like Jericho mocking Goldberg's entrance, getting lost on the way to the ring Spinal Tap style, and then only getting teeny tiny pyro upon finally making it to the stage. Sounds good, right? But we might not actually get to see Jericho wrestle tonight because Raven cuts a promo. He gets on the mic and says, you know what, this is all terrible, I've lost my stable, I don't feel like wrestling tonight, I only found out about this match very recently, so I'm not going to do it. And off he heads up the ramp, and he's just a kid, and life is a nightmare. I'm just a kid, I know that it's not fair, nobody cares. Future Jack here goes on for a little bit, it's gonna keep going. Then me to what the hell is wrong with me, don't fit it. It was the last chorus into the bridge. I surprised you there. Before Raven can leave, Jericho gets on the mic and baits him into accepting the match by calling him a loser. I don't think it should have taken that much, because I don't care how much of a gloomy boy Raven is. This is a TV title match on pay-per-view. Give it a go, Raven, buddy. You might win it. They brawl to the outside early on where Raven takes control, but then Jericho takes control back in the ring with his signature running corner dropkick thingy. But he does it off the top rope here. I'm used to him doing it off the second turnbuckle. Now he's doing it off the top one. And I'm like, nice. Sick wrestling, bruh. He tries to follow up with a running, jumping splash off the apron, but Raven moves and Jericho goes face first into the guardrail and sells it appropriately. Or maybe it's not selling at all because he just ran and leapt face first into the guardrail. Back in the ring, both guys just start cheating, just start breaking the rules. Raven uses a very grungy flannel shirt to choke Jericho. Jericho tries to remove the turnbuckle pad and does so, but he ends up the one slingshotted into it. That's how the wrestling works. Jericho gets the lion tamer applied shortly thereafter, but Raven makes the ropes and hits Jericho with the even floor DDT. I'm quite proud of how that may have come out. I'll watch it back in the edit. Hopefully it was alright. It's only a near fall though, and the blatant cheating continues as Jericho hits an obvious low blow right in front of the referee, who does nothing. That's a recurring theme of this show. Chris Kanyon runs out and tries to interfere to help Raven. He's a former Flock member, but still kind of loyal to Raven, and it works as Jericho is whipped right into Kanyon. Raven sets up for another, oh god, even floor, and Jericho counters it into a lion tamer. Raven taps out and Jericho gets the win. Look how happy he is. He's literally jumping for joy. Decent opener, you know. Kind of rough and ready, and I wasn't a fan of the referee overlooking the very obvious low blow, but apart from that, the action felt nicely paced and quite intense too. Both of these guys, of course, would end up in WWE within the next sort of year or two or three. Didn't take very long at all, and I think Jericho's WWF debut is one of my favourite debuts in just wrestling history. Right, match number 2. Oh, wait. Oh, no. Hulk Hogan's here, and Eric Bischoff's with him. Yeah, if you watched my weirdest episodes on Cultaholic, you'll know that whenever we did a sort of a reaction to a WCW show or a TNA, one with Bischoff heavily involved, I kind of lost my mind. Now you'd think that Hogan and Bischoff are here to hype Hogan's big match against the Warrior later on in the evening. But instead, they're here to talk about Hogan's nephew Horace, a lower card wrestler who Hogan revealed was his relative on last week's Nitro before mercilessly beating him down. Hogan says he's going to keep things short and sweet in this promo, brothers, and then just absolutely rambles about Horace and his beatdown of him. He just talks about how heartless he is, and he finally brings it around to talking about his opponent by saying, if I can do that to my own flesh and blood warrior, imagine what I'm going to do to you, which, you know, makes sense. It's all very evil, kind of cartoonishly evil actually, and very effective, but it just takes a long time. So much so that even once he's done and the announcers try to move us on to the next bit of the show, I can't pay attention to what they're saying because even off mic, Hogan is still loudly cutting a promo into the camera that's on him, saying like, I'm gonna bury Warrior in a toxic waste dump, dude. I'm like, alright, I believe you, but come on, that's later on, Hulk. Okay, now it's time for match number 2. Sweet. And it's two big, large men hitting each other very hard, which, as you'll recall from earlier, is kind of what I wanted to see. It's Meng, aka Haku, aka Tama Tonga's dad, aka possibly the shoot scariest wrestler to ever live, versus Wrath, aka Adam Bomb, aka Brian Clark, aka Jesus Christ, have you seen the size of this guy? Meng jumps Wrath during his entrance, and I'm like, oh no, it's going to be like a slow, sloppy brawl on the outside. Nope, instantly proven wrong. A running cannonball off the apron. Have you seen? He shouldn't be able to move like that. Once they get in the ring, it is quite a heavyweight brawl, but it's a decent one, and it's nicely interspersed with a big power move or two. It doesn't last very long though, because Wrath absolutely finishes Meng off with his finisher, the Meltdown, a gut wrench into massive power slam kind of jackhammer kind of thing. And that's very interesting indeed, because they were talking on commentary quite a lot about Wrath's unbeaten record so far. Was he being positioned as maybe like a backup Goldberg perhaps? Unfortunately, he wasn't able to become one, instead losing his unbeaten streak to Kevin Nash, why does that sound familiar, and falling afoul of injuries. He'd return in 2000 though, teaming with Bryan Adams to form the Team Chronic and winning Tag Gold. And I believe that since then, I think he's talked about how it was like his favourite period in his career, so that's good. Hey cool internet dudes, Billy Kidman's in the internet zone, and he's the Cruiserweight champion, and he's here to talk about defending that belt tonight on the internet. That's crazy. He's defending his title against the winner of our next match, which means that that person will be forced to wrestle twice tonight. But you can find out more about it by logging on to online and talking to Billy Kidman and check out his interview, and that's so radical. Who's this guy on the left? That's just the IT guy, isn't it? The match to determine Billy's opponent is right now, and it's a matchup so 1998 that it absolutely hurts. It's Juventud Guerrera versus Disco Inferno. Now, Kidman won the belt from Juventud not long before this, so I can't believe I'm saying this, but you'd expect Disco to win this one to set up a fresh title match also tonight. I know Disco's going to win. They start off going back and forth, and Juvi takes control, and then somehow ends up in this position, and they kind of botch whatever they were going for. Then they try it again, and oh, it was kind of like a leg drop over the back of the head. Disco gets monkey flipped to the outside, and then Juvi kind of vaults himself backwards through the ropes into like an attempted reverse head scissors on the floor. They don't quite nail it, and it looks in the end like Disco has just slammed Juvi on the outside, but that's not the plan, so Disco sells it and Juvi doesn't. That's wrestling where everything's made up and the points don't matter. They go back and forth some more, Juvi nails a plancha, and then they seem to be having just a full-on conversation with each other on the outside, and then back in the ring, Disco blocks a sunset flip attempt and does the Macarena. Maybe that's what they were talking about on the outside. Don't forget to hit the Macarena after the sunset, brother. Disco does a giant swing because he is a member of the Bar, but then he gets too dizzy himself and ends up falling head first into Juvi's gentleman's area. Should that be a DQ? I genuinely don't know. Juventud recovers though because Disco spends too long dancing on the top rope. Of course he does, that's just his gimmick, that's just what he does, he just dances too much. And then Juvi uses this opportunity to kind of run through his offense, but then Disco cuts him off and hits actually a sick jumping pile driver to pick up the win. I was like, whoa. Disco's moving on to face Billy Kidman, and it's the funniest shift in tone I've ever seen because it goes from this horrifyingly scary finishing move, which looks awesome, but it's like, oh my god, I hope Guerrero's okay. And then immediately, Disco Fever. This time for a Scott Steiner promo. Everybody just buckle up. This could go literally anywhere. Quick reminder, Scott's a bad guy. He's in NWO Hollywood. He's wrestling his babyface brother, whom he betrayed, Rick Steiner, tonight, and Buff Bagwell wants to be in Rick's corner despite literally being aligned with Scott like a month before. Scott says on the mic, "We're in the town that..." Scott says, "We're in the town that never sleeps." That's New York, not Las Vegas. And I've been going with all my freaks for 30 days and 30 nights. I can't, I'm sorry. Steiner says that Rick and Buff are both losers, so why don't they team up against himself and his stablemate, the Giant, Paul White, the Big Show, the Giant. And sure enough, here comes the Giant. And I'm like, but that's not the match that you're booked for, Scott. Yeah, two problems here. One, as mentioned, Scott's got a singles match tonight. And number two, right, they don't even mention this, but I checked, Scott's not even one of the tag team champions at this point. It's the Giant, he's one half of the champions, and Scott Hall. But Scott Hall's on this card elsewhere. So is the free Scott rule in effect? Can they get Mr. Too Hotty in, for example? Authority figure JJ Dillon kind of just appears next to them, actually, really blasé. Like, guys, there's one condition, actually. JJ says if the good guys win that tag match, then Scott does have to face Rick one-on-one, and Scott agrees. I mean, JJ, you've solved nothing here, mate. You've had an absolute shocker, because not only has Scott managed to dance around the match that was already booked and get himself a chance of getting out of it, but also we've not even addressed the fact that Scott is not even one of the tag team champions. Why are we bowing to the whims of Scott Steiner anyway, which is never a good idea, and I'm starting to think that JJ Dillon has lost control of this entire show. So annoying. Anyway, look at baby Finlay. Whoa. Finlay is taking on, hey man, it's Alex Wright, German superstar and former tag team partner of Disco Inferno, which sadly means, yes, we are in for more dancing. You can't have dancing back to back in two separate matches on the same card. There's too much dancing on the show for me. The background of this match is barely touched upon, but it's actually anime as hell, so I'm surprised that they've not kind of written more. Basically, they're saying, oh yeah, so Finlay cost Alex Wright's dad his career when Finlay was wrestling in Europe, and now Alex Wright wants revenge. I'm like, bit more info there, please. It's intense, man. It's a blood feud. So of course we begin things with a lockup. But Wright, who's the heel, heroically takes control of the match against the babyface who ended his father's career, and celebrates taking control of the match by dancing, actually. I need to get through this because the ladder stuff on the show needs discussion, but I'm just sick of the dancing. They exchange European uppercuts while the crowd chant boring, so Alex Wright does some dancing, of course he does. Then they brawl on the outside while the cameraman hides behind the ring post. Get in there, Kurosawa! I want to see what's going on. Actually, Kurosawa's films were renowned for their excellent composition. That was a bit of a joke, although I am personally more of an Ozu man myself when cinematography is concerned. Anyway, they get back in, Finlay misses a charge in the corner, and Alex Wright hits a neckbreaker for the win. Now, personally speaking, if I had avenged my father on pay-per-view, I would probably have become overwhelmed with emotion and pride in myself. Alex Wright dances up the ramp, so we're all different. The next match is a battle of two former members of Raven's flock. We've got Lodi, who's kind of sad about the stable disbanding, and we've got Perry Saturn, who kind of caused it. Lodi's got a really deep gimmick, and it's quite interesting. His gimmick is that he brings signs everywhere with him, and when a stagehand tries to take the signs backstage, motorbike. I'm a cowboy. A crew member tries to take the signs to the back. He chases after her and brings them back to ringside. It's deep stuff, like it probably means something. It quickly becomes apparent that Perry Saturn is far, far better than Lodi, who gets a bit overwhelmed. He's like, I've had enough of this. Tries to walk out of the match. Saturn chases him down, brings him back in the ring, and subjects him to all manner of very nicely executed suplexes. Saturn caps things off with a Death Valley driver. You can't see Perry. And he gets the win. It's basically a squash match, and I regret writing that joke. Right then, it's time for Billy Kidman's Cruiserweight title defense against Disco Inferno. And then after that, we'll be on to the matches involving the main eventers, the NWO members and stuff, with the big muscles and the backstage clout and all that stuff. I can't wait. Yeah. Billy Kidman is another former henchman of Raven's, but Billy really thrived after the split of the group, winning the Cruiserweight title, and I think being positioned by the company as a bit of a hunky ladies man, I think, everybody. Why am I weird? Like, I should be able to just say to you directly, I think WCW at this point were positioning Billy Kidman as a bit of a ladies man. There we go, I've done it. I didn't even go all like loosey-goosey and strange. Bit of a ladies man, you get? Turn into like Johnny Bravo meets Eric Cartman. Now, how do I know that Billy is being positioned as such? Because during his entrance, they keep cutting to women in the crowd, but kind of timing it wrong. Like, they get the tail end of their reaction. I'm sure they were excited initially, but then this woman, for example, is just kind of peering, like, who's that? Oh, okay. Kidman displays his agility early on, but he's all grungy and alternative, so it's unorthodox agility, like this strange head scissors, which looks weird in this screenshot, but trust me, in real time, it actually works out pretty well. Disco takes control and Kidman spills to the outside, where he's actually taunted by a member of the crowd, dressed as him? A future Billy Kidman, perhaps, offering some guidance. They continue to switch momentum back and forth, having a perfectly serviceable match all the while, until Disco nails that insane piledriver again, and Kidman kicks out. What? It's a legitimately really nasty, great-looking finishing move, and Kidman's like, I'll kick out of that before 3, brothers. He's like Kenta Kobashi with this fighting spirit. He goes for the piledriver again, but Kidman counters it into a facebuster, heads up top, hits his finisher, the shooting star press, which is a very over move at this time. The crowd pop huge for it, and he retains the Cruiserweight title. All fine, absolutely no complaints here, apart from with the booking. The wrestling was fine. The booking, what on earth is going on? Why have the heel wrestle twice in one night, tiring themselves out, and then acting like the babyface is some big hero for being able to beat a weakened opponent? Doesn't make any sense. It's the real answer, I would guess, is because WCW don't care about anything that happens below the main event scene. Well done, Billy. Right, all the workings out the way. Gross. Now it's time to delve in to the murky upper card of WCW, featuring the NWO and all that kind of stuff. Yes, this is what pro wrestling's all about. First, the tag team title match we've been building up to. Scott Steiner, somehow filling in for Scott Hall despite that never really being explained, and the Giant make their way out to the ring. Paul's just smoking a cigarette. Like, Paul, are you really taking this title defense seriously? They're taking on Rick Steiner and Buff Bagwell. Can't be trusted, don't trust him. As we know, the Steiners, really good tag team, legendary tag team even, but earlier in '98, Scott betrayed Rick and joined the NWO. Ever since then, and it's been quite a few months now, Scott's been ducking Rick, avoiding a one-on-one match with him, and by this point, by Halloween Havoc, the crowd are desperate for Rick to get his revenge. And that singles match was originally booked for the previous pay-per-view Fall Brawl, but not long into the match it was called off after an apparent shoot neck injury to Scott's stablemate at the time, Buff Bagwell. But surprise, it was all a work, and they burst out of the ambulance that Buff had been taken into, and they beat Rick down. But in the weeks since that pay-per-view, Buff has seemingly had a change of heart. As mentioned, he saved Rick from an attack by Scott, and they celebrated together, and if you look, Buff is still wearing his NWO shirt. All the signs are there. It's almost too obvious what's going to happen, right? If the challengers win, Rick gets that one-on-one match against Scott, finally, immediately after this match, thanks to the ruthless but fair administrative skills of JJ Dillon. Thanks, JJ. Rick's the face in peril early on. The heels start beating him down, but Rick starts to make his comeback and starts to kick his brother's ass, and the crowd are into it. They're like, yes, this is what we've wanted for so long. And you know what? The booking's actually working. Rick gets the tag to Buff Bagwell. Buff gets in the ring, turns on Rick straight away. Wow. They didn't even disguise it or try to make it clever. But don't worry, because the match is still going on. We still don't know who's going to win. There's still drama here. Does that make the Buff Bagwell storyline and Swerve good? No, it just makes it less bad. Weirdly, straight after revealing that he's been a heel all along, Buff's like, right, job done, jogs to the back. I don't think the ref could have technically done anything if Buff had just stayed there and helped the NWO beat Rick down some more. It could have just been 3-on-1, but Buff's like, my work is done, and I'm out of here. Back to the action, Scott just hoofs his brother right in the balls, right in front of the referee, Charles Robinson, who does nothing. Again, I'm getting a bit sick of this. No, I'm not. I'm not getting sick of the show. It gets worse later on. Rick gets beaten down a lot more, and then the Giant does that one spot that grinds my gears more than anything, which is the making the pinfall, 1-2, break your own fall. Oh, I'm so cocky, boomy. I hate that because it doesn't help either person. It makes the heel look like an idiot, and even if the babyface comes back to win, I still think it makes them look weak. I've always despised that spot. Rick starts to fight back, so Scott, again, blatant low blow right in front of the referee. I believe that's 3 on the night so far, and oh my god, what's this? The Giant's going up top. Big Paul goes for a terrifying and legitimately very impressive flying drop kick, but his intended target, Rick, moves, and Scott takes the move instead. From there, Rick fires up, scoots up top, and hits the big flying bulldog for the win, and I guess wins the tag team titles on his own. I mean, hey, the crowd love it, and finally that means that immediately now we finally get the Steiner versus Steiner singles match that the crowd have been wanting for months at this point. Scott doesn't want any part of this and tries to leave, but Rick stops him and beats him back down to the ring, and Scott begs off. He's like, no, please, I didn't do anything to deserve this apart from betray you months ago and then spend the following few months beating you down with the help of my new cool friends. Of course, Rick's like, no, apology not accepted, and starts to kick Scott's ass, and then Scott does another low blow. He does another one, guys. Rick fights back because he's a brave hero, and then Bill Clinton jumps the guardrail and lays out a couple of security guards. It's WCW. To be fair, when I was really young and first getting into wrestling, I'll admit I was a WWF kid. I don't fully understand. I don't have the emotional pull that WCW fans, especially those a bit older than myself, maybe have to this era. And people will say to me, like, you don't get it, you weren't there at the time. Goldberg, Sting, the NWO when it was good at first. And I understand all of that. But if I say to you, a man in a Bill Clinton mask jumps the guardrail, you know exactly which promotion I'm talking about. Fellow NWO Hollywood member Stevie Ray comes out, hands Bill Clinton a slapjack, and then Clinton uses it to lay out both Rick and the referee. It's not the real Bill Clinton, it's a masked man. I don't know why I keep pretending it's the real one. The guy unmasks, and oh my god, it's Buff Bagwell. I literally would never have guessed this in a million years. He grabs the referee's unconscious arm to make kind of like a manual pinfall, and I'm this close to quitting. And that's because the NWO's plan makes no sense, right? I'll walk through what the NWO... If this is to be believed, this was their plan in kayfabe, together, secret heels meeting. What's the plan going to be for this match? What if Rick wins and then Scott's got to face him one-on-one? He doesn't want to do that. Don't worry, boys. We've got an idea. So, Buff, you're going to turn on Rick in the match, right? In the tag match. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to turn on him. Yeah, don't worry. But what if Rick somehow ends up winning 2-on-1 though? Have you thought about that? I mean, he won't, but just in case, I do have a contingency plan. What I'll do is, I'll go to the back before the match is over, get changed into my suit and Bill Clinton mask, then I'll go all the way around the building to the other side of the arena, and I'll interfere from the crowd. Okay, cool. Can you not just go down the entrance ramp? I mean, I could, because that's what Stevie's gonna do, and I'm gonna meet him there and he's gonna give me the weapon, but just don't feel like it, mate. It's just all nonsense bollocksery, and it shouldn't make me this frustrated. It really shouldn't, because literally who cares? Where were we? Right, Buff's got the referee's hand. He counts 1, he counts 2, Rick kicks out, and Buff stops the count. Just count the 3 anyway. Why are you adhering to the rules of this nonsense scenario that you have just created anyway? Scott hits the Frankensteiner, Rick kicks out again, Buff again stops counting even though he can literally do what he wants, and Rick starts to make the unlikeliest of comebacks. That was a car. Did you hear the car alarm? That startled me. Rick gets his hands on Buff Bagwell, and on commentary, Shivani's like, oh man, we've been waiting for this for a long time, and Rick's about to give Buff his ultimate comeuppance, and he kind of drops him ribs first over the top rope. And I'm like, oh man, it's so brutal. Oh, I can't even watch. Rick hits the Bulldog on Scott, makes the cover, just as replacement referee Nick Patrick runs in with his weird counting style, makes the 3 count, and Rick wins and gets the ultimate revenge that we've craved for so long, and it was so worth it, wasn't it? Wasn't it, guys? Wasn't it? Next up, I am praying that it's something more straightforward, a match where they just wrestle and they don't try and do anything unexpected or swerve the fans. The next match is, it's Kevin Nash versus Scott Hall. So, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, the outsiders, founding members of the NWO, thick as thieves, one might say. Now, Hall was out of the picture for a while. He took time away to go to rehab, and by the time he'd returned, the NWO had split into Hogan's Hollywood faction and Nash's Wolfpack faction. Hall appeared to join the Wolfpack and then immediately betrayed his old friend Nash and joined Hollywood instead, and that's led to this feud. And that's all pretty fine, you know, that's standard wrestling storyline stuff. I've got no issues with that, but it gets a bit uncomfortable when we go into Hall's storyline reasons for the betrayal. It is heavily implied through promos from both Hall and Nash in the build-up that Scott has done this because he has been really struggling with addiction issues and has lost a lot of money as a result. So I guess the reason they're telling us is that Scott has joined Hogan because of the additional financial incentive. This all gets uncomfortable when Hall starts brawling sloppily, deliberately in matches and slurring his way through his promos. And yes, he may have been getting the better of those demons in real life, off screen, but those demons would return. So in hindsight, it really makes this hard to watch. Anyway, in the storyline, Nash has now vowed to beat some sense into his former friend. Let's see if he does. Hall makes his entrance with a drink. Great. Nash comes out and gets more pyro than everybody else so far on the show combined because he is Kevin Nash, damn it. He's a big name. Wolfpack's back, causing masters. Hall throws his drink in Nash's face, and this is not how I was expecting the match to begin, but he's kicking Nash's ass. He's beating him down on the outside, chokes him with a cable. Nash is bleeding. What's he gonna do? Hall gets back in the ring, quick DX taunt, not sure if that's the most sensible thing to do in the middle of a ratings war, and then gets on the mic. Oh no, it's time for a mid-match promo. Scott tells Nash to take his sorry ass to the back, but Nash, being a brave babyface, he says no, and they have what I think is meant to be quite an epic, gritty brawl, but I don't know, it's not bad, but I don't know if they're quite nailing the tone that they're going for. Nash takes control for a while and beats Hall down now, at one stage pretending to down a drink before laying him out, and I'm like, alright, so I get that WCW's edgy and stuff, but I like character consistency, and I thought Nash was meant to be helping his friend in kind of a weird way by beating some sense into him, not mocking his ongoing issues. Nash hits the big boot, the straps come down, he hits the jackknife powerbomb, and a second one, and then he walks off and loses by countout. Oh, yeah, it feels weird. Makes it feel like the results don't matter, but this would have storyline implications later on down the road. Now, those weren't good storyline implications, and that's the end of the sentence. That's because even though Nash didn't technically win the match here, this would ultimately get Scott back on his side after Scott was ousted from NWO Hollywood. So it did all come back around and prove very valuable to Kevin Nash. That's because later on in the year, he would have a very, very important title match, which I'll talk about later on. I hate it. It was so stupid, I really hate it. Next up, oh, Sniffer 316's here. Good to see him, I'm glad he made it. And next up is a match which on paper should be fantastic, but this is October 98 in WCW. It's Bret Hart versus Sting. It's for the WCW United States Championship. Now let's delve into the background on this one. On one hand, we've got Sting. You know, WCW's great hope during the NWO's heyday, dropping down from the rafters, terrifying the heels with his baseball bat, all that good stuff, which has since passed into, like, American wrestling lore. Except his heroic run was never paid off like it should have been, as many of you will know. That's because he had a very underwhelming title win, a big ultimate victory over Hogan at Starrcade 97, but which, as I say, was very underwhelming. Some would say deliberately made to be underwhelming by Hogan, Bischoff, and the powers that be. Now, having, for whatever reason, held back on fully capitalizing on one main event level mega babyface, WCW could have had another one just fall into their lap. That's because Bret Hart was already about to jump ship anyway, but was now doing so under a cloud of controversy and mass attention following the Montreal Screwjob. Bret had been one of the biggest stars in the world of wrestling since the early 90s, really, and I think, in hindsight, it is baffling how badly mismanaged his time in WCW was. By complete coincidence and luck, WCW, in the midst of a storyline where this corrupt group of heels were being corrupt all over their product, WCW now were welcoming in this guy who'd just been screwed by their competition and was now railing against injustice and impurity in the world of wrestling. So obviously we're going to have him be a big babyface against the NWO, right? Yeah, you'd think so. More on that in a sec. Anyway, Sting's run with the belt got very messy in '98, and he ended up dropping it to Randy Savage with the help of Kevin Nash, who was already pulling away from the NWO and about to set up the Wolfpack. When the split finally happened, both sides of the NWO now tried to compete for Sting's services, and he decided to join the Wolfpack. Hell yes, so cool, Wolfpack is back, causing mass destruction. Except I don't like this, because why would you join the stable led by the guy who just cost you the WCW title? Meanwhile, Bret spent his early period in WCW as a babyface, as expected, but then when Savage won the belt, Bret turned heel and helped Hogan win the belt. And didn't become like an actual member of the NWO, but like was an affiliate of the group. Why would you... I don't know what they were doing. Again, just for a point of contrast, because in the first half of '98, this is when, over in WWF, Steve Austin was taking over the wrestling world. That's just what was going on in both companies at the time. So now, after the NWO split, now we have Sting, part of the Wolfpack. So cool, Wolfpack is back causing now Sting versus, on the other side of things, Bret. Not a member of NWO Hollywood, but like affiliated with them for some reason. And now they're going to wrestle for the secondary title, and it's going to be awesome. This isn't Bret's first reign with the US title. He'd won it a couple of times at this point, and as he begins his defense here against Sting, he starts things off by picking a fight with a fan in a Goldberg shirt in the front row, which, if you know Bret, really checks out. They go back and forth in the early stages of the match, while on commentary, Tony Schiavone tells us a very important detail that we've kind of missed, saying, these guys, they're both jealous of each other's finishers. Is that it? Is that it? Is it? After everything I've just said, all the background I've just given, that was the best WCW could have come up with for this feud. Jealous of each other's finishes. It's the same move. Two of the biggest stars of the decade. Two of the most popular wrestlers of all time. And the best reason for a feud that they could come up with was, you stop doing the sharpshooter. No, you stop doing the scorpion. You stop it. Speaking of, actually, Sting gets the Scorpion Deathlock applied. 1-0 to the Wolfpack against the forces of NWO Hollywood. Well, not their best friend for some reason. But Bret makes the ropes. Now, a little way into the match, and Bret jams his leg pretty hard on a leapfrog attempt. And I'm thinking, well, in a different universe, I would think, oh no, is this a legitimate injury? But this is WCW, also known as Swerve Central. I'm Jack the Jobber, and I'm your guide through this carnival of tricksters and knaves. Don't fall for their lies, everybody. Sure enough, Bret takes the opportunity to load up his fist with a foreign object hidden inside his ring gear. But then Sting catches him with it, takes it off him, and puts it on his own hand. Now the ref, obviously at this point, catches Sting with the weapon and tells him, oh, you better not use that. And Bret takes the opportunity to hit a low blow, another one for the night. But at least in this case, Bret had the decency to wait until the referee was unsighted. The man's a pro, what can I say? Bret beats Sting down for a while until the referee checks on Sting from behind, but Sting thinks that it's Bret about to attack him again and hits the referee with a back elbow, and the referee is down. Shenanigans, you say, on this show? For now, they just keep having a match around the downed referee, including a big superplex, which lands on his poor leggies. Be careful, everybody. Then Sting goes for the Stinger Splash, overshoots it, and just knocks himself out on the ring post. Like, he's done. He's going to lose the match. He's just flopping around. And I'm like, this isn't exactly the way I would have had the bout go. Why not just have Bret cheat to gain the advantage anyway? The ref's already down. Why do we need Sting to look like a complete idiot in the process? As mentioned, Sting's already out. Bret grabs the bat for good measure and just lays in a few shots to Sting, wakes up the ref, clamps on the sharpshooter. Obviously by this point Sting is unable to respond, and Bret wins the match. Bret retains, and it's... well, I haven't seen a great deal of Bret Hart matches in WCW. I've seen a few, but I've not seen a lot, and I'm certain there'll be worse ones than this. But what I will say is, it's one of the least captivating Bret Hart pay-per-view matches I can ever remember watching. Sting gets loaded into an ambulance, and everyone's worried about him, and it would end up writing him off for a while, but this eats up like 5 minutes of pay-per-view time. And as we'll see later on in the show, time was of the essence here. So that was Sting versus Bret. On paper, I think, probably a lot of people's most anticipated match heading into the night, and instead it's just cold tea. It's just cold tea and no biscuits allowed. Right, I guess we'll do Hogan versus Warrior then. So remember when I said there were two matches on this show, one considered the best of a certain wrestler's entire career and one considered to be one of the worst wrestling matches of all time? Just keep that in mind. Hogan and Warrior had an epic battle in the main event of WrestleMania 6, but this time it's even more epic because it's face versus heel. Oh yeah! The build up to this one's fairly simple, I guess. Hogan's old rival, Warrior, has arrived in WCW and he's just messing around, he's just causing trouble for Hulk Hogan, you know? He's causing trouble though in a bit of a weird way. He has heroically brainwashed Hogan's henchman, the Disciple, aka Brutus the Barber Beefcake, and he's also confounded the heels with his mystical dry ice powers. Ooh. Hogan proved how ruthless and evil he is by beating up his shoot nephew, Horace Hogan, shortly before this event, and I think that's all the background we need. On with the match. Warrior decks Hogan at the bell and takes control with an arm wringer, and already I'm like, oh no, are the crowd really gonna enjoyed like the cheesy 80s slow-paced stuff. This is the 90s now, you know? It's a whole new decade. Nevermind came out and stuff. They do the old Warrior powering out of the test of strength spot, but it takes a long time, and already you can tell the crowd are getting quite impatient. I actually timed it. From the moment Hogan grabs both of Warrior's arms, it takes Warrior 1 minute 50 to break free. And you might think, well, as long as the big payoff's good, the payoff is a crisscross, an old school crisscross spot. No. Tony on commentary even goes, wow, I haven't seen a crisscross in so long. And then Warrior no-sells a body slam, gets up, hits a body slam of his own. I like this moment. Warrior clotheslines Hogan to the outside. Now Hogan, clearly the plan here is that Hogan's going to grab Warrior's leg, drag him outside the ring too, and then they're going to have a bit of a brawl on the outside. But instead, Hogan gets clotheslined to the outside. He goes to grab Warrior's leg, but the ref, for some reason, has taken Warrior over to the other side of the ring. So Hogan's just there like, what? I think Hogan's just given up at this point, and so have I. Because instead of improvising something, you just see him beckoning to Warrior, and he goes like, come on, come on. And Warrior just gets to the outside, and now it's time for the brawl. Brawl, 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 back in the ring, ref bump time as Hogan collides with Nick Patrick during a drop down. So Hogan, Warrior drops down, Hogan skips over the top of him. Nick Patrick tries to get out of the way, so Hogan has to divert course and knock him down. Don't try and get out of the way, Nick Patrick. It's not real. Still, it kind of works, I guess. Hogan, if I'm being really fair, Hogan's a heel. It would make sense that he would deliberately take out the referee. He calls for help now with the referee down, and here comes the Giant. He sets up for the big boot. Hogan's holding Warrior in the way, but you guessed it, that plucky little agile demon Warrior scoots out of the way, and Hogan eats the big boot in the head. Warrior fights off a couple more Hollywood henchmen before covering Hogan. One of them was Vincent, by the way, aka Virgil, before covering Hogan and then counting his own pinfall because there's no ref. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this was just the real finish, given what we saw in the Steiners match. But thankfully it's not though, and the match continues. Or not thankfully, because it gets worse. Hogan gets back on top as the referee recovers, and he starts choking Warrior with his weight belt. And then the referee sees what's happening, but instead of, warning Hogan or even DQing him, he instead grabs Hogan by the hair, and Hogan sells it. So you've got Warrior going, and then Hogan going, oh, brother, and the ref going, and at this point, this company was very much still in contention to be the #1 company in North America. Next up, Hogan lets go. We get out of that mess, but then Hogan misses some elbow drops, and then Warrior continues to roll like a boss fight in a platformer, and he rolls and takes Hogan out like a log, with Hogan failing to jump out of the way. Warrior goes for his finisher now, the big running splash, but he misses it as Hogan avoids the move. And on commentary now, the team are the lads are asleep. Schiavone goes like, literally this is the call. He goes, Warrior going for the splash, and he missed it. Warrior now gets some revenge with the weight belt until the referee stops him, and Hogan rolls to a corner of the ring, starts messing about with something in the corner. What on earth is that? Well, it's flash paper. Hogan goes to shoot a fireball at Warrior. It's an old wrestling trope. We've seen it before involving Hogan. This time he goes to do it and nothing happens. And then with unintentional but perfect comedic timing, the flash paper then goes off in Hogan's face instead. And you might be thinking, oh no, this is an awful botch. And it is. But you also are probably thinking they've just blown the finish to the match. Surely the flash paper was integral to the match's finish, right? No, not even close. By the way, Hogan's now bleeding somehow, and they have a bit of a conversation about what to do next. Because the problem is that Hogan now at this stage needs to be in control of the match. That's the plan, that's what the fireball was for. He needed to take control. But Warrior's still in control because it all went wrong. And this is the plan they came up with. Warrior presses the advantage, but then Hogan takes control back with a blatant low blow in front of the Hogan hits the leg drop, and this one's over, right? But wait, no it's not, because who's that on the ramp? Why, it's his nephew, Horace Hogan, with teeny tiny Eric Bischoff way off in the back. Look how teeny tiny he is. Meanwhile, as Horace approaches the ring, Warrior is just running through Hogan. He's building up a head of steam. It's time for him to win, just as Horace gets there to help it. Well, not help him, because I've not hinted at it, but we all know what's coming here. Bischoff grabs the referee and distracts him, while swerve dudes, because Horace hits not Hogan with a steel chair, but Warrior instead. Yeah, Horace is on his uncle's side despite the merciless beatdown only a week ago, and they celebrate together, and Hogan's done it, he's beaten Warrior, and it's just bad. I think, despite everything that went wrong here, my very least favourite part of it is, and this has happened so many times across various pay-per-views I've watched in both WCW and TNA as well, it's the constant presence of Eric Bischoff. Why was he out there when Horace started to come down the ramp? That only made it even more obvious what was about to happen, and you'd think that Bischoff would know that, right? He knows wrestling, he's not an idiot. I just think he couldn't help himself. He loves the limelight. And what annoys me even more, right, is how smug he acts because of it. He's like, oh, you marks, you all fell for it. My guy is the big Swerve and the faces fell for it as well, and we're still the winners. And no, I didn't fall for it, mate, because you do it every single time. I'm glad WCW went out of bit. Whoa. Let's all calm down before we say regretful things. Horace Hogan and Hulk Hogan tried to celebrate by covering Warrior in lighter fluid, and they're about to set him on fire, and then security thankfully stopped things, and Bischoff's like, get out of here, security, as if they're doing something so unreasonable. And that's it. Is this one of the worst wrestling matches of all time? I think relative to its level of hype, maybe. I mean, they'd only main evented WrestleMania together 8 years before this, which isn't really that long if you think about it. And instead, it was like a complete catastrophe. I think if it wasn't for the fireball mishap and the really obvious swerve, then this wouldn't have been like an all-time terrible match. It would have just been immensely underwhelming. But because those two things happened in the same bout, yeah, it's a hard one to watch. It's also, in my opinion, a real microcosm of everything wrong with WCW at this point, and for the remainder of the company's run, basically. It's name value over talent, and it's swerves over storytelling. This would be Warrior's last match in WCW, and his second last match ever, until a decade later when he beat Orlando Jordan in Barcelona, and yes, that's a real thing that happened. Hogan, meanwhile, would take a break from the company shortly after this, but he'd be back in January 99 to take part in another of the worst segments in WCW history. I'll explain more at the end, but now it's time for the main event. Goldberg defending the WCW Championship against DDP. On paper, that's a pretty good match. And as you can tell, because I've not said it about any of the matches so far, and this is the only one left, yes, this is the match considered to be the best match of one particular participant's career. That sounds pretty good. There's no way that WCW can mess this up, right? How could they? By not showing most of the match to a large chunk of their pay-per-view audience at the time. Yes, because most WCW pay-per-views were 3 hours long, but Halloween Havoc 98 was 3.5 hours long, or certainly over 3. Many pay-per-view feeds just ended as the main event was about to begin. They did air a replay for free the next night on Nitro, but it's just an absolute comedy of errors at this point. And I thought this series was going to be fun. I thought I was going to have fun doing this. No, it didn't. No, I'm just kidding. I've had fun. Now, for the purposes of this video, let's just pretend that we were part of the lucky few, the lucky section of the pay-per-view audience that actually got to see Goldberg versus DDP on the night as intended. Diamond Dallas Page, fan favorite babyface, extremely likable and charismatic and all that. He's been clashing with the heels throughout the summer, including at one point teaming with Jay Leno to beat Hogan and Bischoff at Road Wild in August. Yeah, man, why not? Also, at the previous pay-per-view Fall Brawl, DDP scored the pinfall in a huge 3-team War Games match to score a massive win for Team WCW against both splinter groups of the NWO. A year too late, but good effort though. He got himself a title shot in the process. Goldberg's rise to the top is thankfully, given everything we've talked about in this video already, is thankfully very simple. He just won loads of matches and beat loads of guys. This culminated in July 98, where on Nitro, Goldberg beat Hulk Hogan in Atlanta, Georgia to become WCW champion for the first time. That is arguably, the last great booking decision WCW ever made. And Goldberg's not just the champion now carrying this belt into Halloween Havoc, he is still undefeated, making this face versus face against DDP. Sounds uncomplicated, should be good, let's see what happens. They may both be good guys, but there's no friendly rivalry here, as both men talk trash at the bell, and then Goldberg shoves DDP into the corner. The champion tackles Page to the outside, and it feels really quite real and dangerous, and then they get back in the ring, and it's still really even and bad-tempered, and already I'm starting to see why people really like this one. Page goes for a quick diamond cutter, but Goldberg catches him and just kind of flicks him, and Page goes flying out of the ring. Clearly, he has his working boots on, and it's good to see. Page gets back into things with a bit of craftiness and gets 2 off a leg sweep, but it feels like he's having to try every trick in the book to keep this unbeatable monster down, and it only ever takes Goldberg just one big power move, and he's back in control. It's a really nice dynamic. Big old Bill is now building up a big old head of steam, and DDP tries to stop that with like a desperation head scissors, kind of spiking Goldberg's head into the canvas, but Bill no-sells it, goes for the spear, and Page has to launch himself out of the way, but it works, and Goldberg goes crashing into the ring post. DDP presses the advantage for a while, but then gets a bit cocky, taunting and motioning for his finisher, turning around right into a monstrous spear from the champion. Oh, I got emotional into a monstrous spear from the champion, guys. But Goldberg's damaged arm from when he crashed into the ring post just before slows him down when he picks up DDP for the jackhammer, and DDP is able to take advantage, sliding down the back, diamond cutter, and the crowd come alive. It's really good. DDP is very weak though and crawls slowly into the cover, 1-2, and Goldberg kicks out just in time. Page goes for a suplex, and Goldberg counters it and shows like ungodly strength to power him up, just seemingly using his arms. Like he doesn't get much of a squat into the, like he's not using much of his leg strength. It's all arms, but Goldberg does it anyway because he's Goldberg, nails the jackhammer and picks up the win. The pair show respect to each other after the bell, and Schiavone starts talking about how this is real wrestling, no betrayals, no sneak attacks or weapons or anything like that. And I'm like, yeah man, maybe stop offering legitimate criticism of the product that you're commentating for. But that is the uncomplicated end of quite a convoluted show, and I can totally see why this is considered to be Goldberg's best match of all time. Barely 10 minutes long, very uncomplicated as I say, but a great dynamic, and both men did really, really well. You've got Goldberg, who is definitely the favourite, but he's come up against this guy who's got this finisher he can hit out of nowhere, and it all just works perfectly. I think in summary, Halloween Havoc 98 is a largely bad show, partly saved by a really, really excellent main event, which most of the paying audience didn't get to see at the time. Kind of sums it up, really. Now let's see what happened in the immediate future for WCW. Perhaps due to replaying a pay-per-view main event for free, the following episode of Nitro actually beat Raw in the ratings. But unfortunately, it was also the final ever ratings win for WCW over the WWF, so yeah, things didn't improve. Goldberg's reign and undefeated streak continued for most of the year until Starrcade, where he defended against Kevin Nash. Remember when I said that Nash's match against Hall earlier on would prove to be crucial in the future? That's because Scott Hall interfered in the match, shocking Goldberg with a cattle prod and helping Nash beat him, not only winning the title, but snapping that undefeated streak as well. It is still regarded by many as a huge booking mistake in the history of WCW, but I don't know if it would be remembered quite as unfavourably had they turned it around. Then it got worse. Now it's worth noting that Kev didn't see Scott's interference. He was still thinking I'm still a babyface and I've just beaten Goldberg clean as a whistle, you know? And a babyface he would remain until a week later on Nitro. That's because that Nitro was on January 4th, 1999. Does that date ring a bell? Because if it does, it's probably because you remember it as the site of the Finger Poke of Doom, aka one of the worst wrestling segments ever. The story of that show was that Nash offered Goldberg a rematch because he'd learned about the screwy finish at Starrcade, and I don't want to beat you like that, Goldberg. Let's have a rematch on Nitro. Come that episode of Nitro, Goldberg is falsely accused of stalking by evil NWO-affiliated valet Miss Elizabeth, who she pals with Hulk Hogan. Goldberg is falsely arrested for much of the episode, and obviously it's Hogan who's behind all of this, coming back to the company after a brief hiatus and stepping in against Nash. So it's Hogan versus Nash on Nitro, and also Eric Bischoff infamously instructed the announce team to spoil the results of the taped Raw main event being broadcast on the very same night, which was Mankind's upset title win. The attempt to spoil the match backfired immensely, and fans switched over in their droves. Meanwhile, back on Nitro, because there's like a jubilant, excellent moment going on in the WWF, but back on Nitro, you'll never guess what. Hogan versus Nash turned out to be a swerve and a ruse all along. Hogan poked Nash in the chest, Nash flopped to the canvas like a big fish, and Hogan pinned him to win back the belt. The whole thing was a plan. Hogan and Nash were in on it together. The two splinter groups of the NWO had finally reformed. Oh no! Goldberg's undefeated streak being ended was for nothing. And once again, the ultimate victims in all of this were the fans. Now, in fairness, Nash has since argued that this would have aged better had Goldberg not gotten injured shortly afterwards, because this was meant to set up Goldberg going up against this new reformed NWO. In theory, this would make Goldberg an even bigger hero, right? He's going to take down this big force. But I don't think that excuses it, because the angle totally devalued the belt. It made Nash look like a chump. The fans were sick of Hogan, and it robbed WCW of any last drops of momentum they might have had at this time. And we know what happened after. The company went into a downward spiral for basically the rest of its existence until in 2001, it was bought out by Vince McMahon, bringing the Monday Night Wars to an end. And that is the story of Halloween Havoc 98. Well, it's the story of Halloween Havoc 98 with extra bits. I've been Jack the Jobber. Thank you very much for watching this video. It was a frustrating one, but we got there in the end. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do like, share, and subscribe and all that sort of stuff. Leave comments, leave blah, 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 blah. YouTube. I'm Jack the Jobber. Ooh, check out my Patreon if you want as well. Patreon.com/Jack the Jobber. Thank you very much indeed to everybody who's over there already. Yeah, what more can I say? That was Halloween Havoc 98. We'll be back with more Very Weird Wrestling, and I'll be back doing more other stuff as well, actually. So look out for that on this channel. Thanks once again, and I'll see you very soon.